Hey guys, what's up? So, as promised, here is the martial arts themed video that I said I was going to do. Sorry, this is not one that where I'm actually doing stuff on screen. As soon as I can find somebody that I can do that with, then I can start putting videos up like that again. But till then, you're gonna have to settle for this. Sorry, but let's get on with it. As you can see by the title, um, damn it, stop with the ums. As you can see by the title, this particular video is on internal and external martial arts, or at least my theory, well, not really my theory, my stance that there really is no such distinction in martial arts. Those of you who've not heard of those terms, it's something that's usually used for Chinese martial arts. It's a way to categorize certain Chinese martial arts. They say that they're internal ones and external ones. And I've stated before in older videos that there really is no such distinction, or generally that particular distinction really doesn't mean anything. And today, in this video, I'm actually going to go deeper into why I feel this way. The reason why I decided to put this video up is generally two reasons. One, because of a rather pleasant conversation that I had under one of my older videos with a guy who goes under the name EccentricM. And the video itself wasn't specifically on this topic, but it was more on the basic arbitrary distinctions that were made in Chinese martial arts, particularly the what I call this somewhat substandard categorization methods that were used to describe Chinese martial arts and how they don't exactly hold up. And I said that the external internal distinction doesn't really hold up under examination. He disagreed and came up with several reasons why he disagreed. And I basically countered with my own opinion, and the conversation was quite pleasant. And I believe he had some strong points for his stance. And I presented my particular points. And while I had that conversation with him, I realized that I didn't really go into depth as to why I felt that the internal and external distinctions don't really hold up. So I felt that it would be a good idea to do it now. And that conversation helped to pretty much inspire me to do this video. By the way, EccentricM, if you happen to be watching this video, I really apologize for not following up after your last post. Generally, I've been very, very busy, and I haven't really been able to respond much to a lot of people's questions to me and certain conversations, especially in the last couple of days. It's not that I was ignoring you. It's not that I was trying to snub you. And just like you, I really enjoyed the conversation. It's very rare to get a pleasant conversation in a YouTube comment section these days. So I definitely didn't want you to think that, I was annoyed with you in any way. Nah. And I would have loved to have kept things going. I've just been so busy. And it's only now that I've been able to actually get some time to pull this video together. So if you're watching this, just, I definitely was enjoying the conversation. And I also want to say that a lot of what you were saying, I don't really think that you were straight up wrong. I definitely agree with a lot of the points that you stated. I just don't think that they are enough to go with the whole external internal distinction. I can see why some people would continue to believe that, and I definitely understand why you have the stance that you do. But there's also a reason why I have mine, and now I'm going to get into it. One, people have to realize that the whole distinction between internal and external didn't really show up until the late 19th century, early 20th century. It's not really a term that you see being bandied about in times when martial arts were being used more than they are now, when they actually were used for life and death situations, when the military was depending on it, or when bodyguards were depending on it, and so on and so forth. Didn't really see that distinction until much later, when martial arts were not exactly being used the same way that they weren't really being used for their intended purpose nearly as much as they were in the past. Actually, there might be some people watching this who have no freaking clue what I'm talking about, so let's quickly get into it. The whole internal, external thing. For those of you who are wondering what I'm talking about, what this is about, generally in Chinese martial arts, one of the many, many different categories that they put martial arts in is external arts and internal arts. Now, external arts, depending on who you talk to, because there's so many different, that's another reason why I have a problem with these distinctions. Depending on who you talk to, internal and external arts have different definitions on what constitutes an internal and external one. But to go with the more popular distinctions, or the more popular definition, generally when someone is talking about an external art, it's an art that they claim mostly relies on muscular strength. And what they mean by that is the strength from the limbs, the arms and legs. That they're mostly just relying on, for lack of a better term, brute strength. Like it's all like, they train their muscles so they can hit hard and hit fast. And all that is coming from the limbs. And the internal arts depend on internal power to, build power in for their strikes. The external arts rely more on muscular strength to power their blows, and the internal arts rely on internal power, like chi. Mostly that's what they talk about. Chi and breath control to power the moves. And the internal arts are generally categorized as Taijiquan, Baguazhang, Xingyiquan, and Bafa. Some people, some people count Bafa, other people don't, but most people do. Now, here's where things get muddled. Here's the problem. And this is why I have a problem with the external and internal distinctions here. One, as I stated before, it's a new distinction, a fairly new distinction. It's not something that you've heard martial arts claim, or it's not a distinction that martial arts claimed way back when martial arts were really being used for their intended purpose, defending oneself or offensively fighting someone. Another problem is the fact that external art, the so-called arts that are considered external, because I already stated the ones that were considered internal, Baguazhang, Taijiquan, Xingyiquan, and Bafa. Everything else is considered an external one. The only internal ones are the ones I just mentioned. Everything else, that's external. Now, anyone who studied Chinese martial arts for even a brief period of time will notice that there's something wrong with stating that all these other arts rely on just muscular strength to be effective. No, they don't. At least not just on the limbs. I have never, not once, all the training I've had, not once have I had a teacher say that you're going to be depending primarily on your muscular power to strike someone. Not once. The long fist that I learned, the bit of long fist I learned, a little bit of Wing Chun that I've learned, and later on when I start going into Baguazhang, you're expecting to hear things like using your center to fight. But the funny thing is, long fist, Wing Chun, Baji, Baguazhang, you name it. They all say that you have to strike from your center in one way or another. Now, yeah, they all have different methods, and yes, they do train the arms and legs to be stronger. There is body conditioning exercises that are used, but by and large, they all basically say that you have to use your center. You have to rely on all of them talk about sinking down into your dantian. All of them say that. All of them state that you're going to be using your waist and rotating your waist or your spine in order to power the blow. That's using this. None of them say that you're going to be relying primarily on your arms and legs to power the blow. They consider that low-level kung fu, or sometimes not even kung fu at all. One of the Chinese adages is that if you don't employ your center, your skill is low-level. No matter what art it is. So if we are then going to point out the fact that, no, they're not relying primarily on here, then what exactly constitutes an external art then? If an external art primarily relies on muscular strength, but not a single Chinese style depends primarily on muscular strength, then that means there really isn't such thing as an external art then, is it? Is there? Or you're going to have to come up with some other definition for it. What makes things even crazier is when you realize then that many of the training methods of the so-called internal arts are seen in the external ones. Now this is where things get interesting. One could argue that there is such a thing as an internal and external art when one looks at the training methods, and when they claim that, well, in the training methods are different. Normally when you look at the external art, there's a lot of body conditioning and there's a lot of strong emphasis on how to strike. Whereas when you look at the internal art, there's more of an emphasis on training one's internal power, and you don't really see that in the external arts. And that's true. to an extent. See, the difference is when you look at an art that's, you can tell it's straight up geared towards fighting. There's pugilistic aspects in its core, Wing Chun, Long Fist, all that. There's an emphasis first on developing a technique, especially in the beginning. In the beginning, there's a lot of training drills. So at first, there's the body conditioning, stretching, strengthening, push-ups, things like that. And then you start drilling your basic punches, your basic kicks, your basic stances. A whole lot of drilling in that, and strengthening the legs, horse stance and all that. Building the strength, you got to go through all the pain of horse stance and all that type of stuff, and constant drills and constant punches and constant blocks in order to, be effective. There's a lot of stuff in basic technique, strengthening your technique. And once you get good at the technique, and then you go through the two-person training, and then the two-person sparring, and your forms practice, of course, to build your calisthenics and all that. Then the power training comes in. Then they start going into how to make it more effective, and that's when they start putting the qigong into things and slowing down your movement so you learn how to do your techniques more effectively. This is what you normally see. When you get into the internal arts, that's when you start seeing the qigong training first. The breathing exercises come first. The stance training and moving slowly and drilling the slower movements come first. And those are the arts where many people see people going through exercises and wondering what the hell they're doing and how it has to do with fighting. You'll see somebody doing something where it looks like they're rolling their abdomen and pushing their limbs out like that over and over again. You'll see the Taiji stuff is really slow, and they have this weird rocking step where they go forward and then move back and then step forward into another technique and then roll back. Like, what the hell does this have to do with fighting? People don't understand it. But those of us who do understand it know that what they're training is they're training how to, effectively power their movements. They're building up their fa jing, or their power issuance. Their strikes, they're learning how to strike through their target. They go through that first. They, do their internal training first. And once they get that going, once the smoothness of their technique is trained properly, when they're, the way their movement is efficient, then they start drilling them faster. Then their movements come faster. Now they start going into combat training. So in general, with the internal arts, they go in one direction. They start with the power training first and then work on the technique afterwards. The external one goes in the other direction. You start with the technique first and then how to power it more effectively afterwards. But here's the thing, they're just moving in different directions, but they both end up in the same place. You're still training with your core. You're still learning how to power your blows more effectively. And whether you're using a whip-like power to make it work, or whether you're working more with a kind of smashing-like power to make it work, or whether you're a more explosive power to make it work, different arts have different theories on how to make the power issuance more effective. They're still doing it the same basic way. It's still meeting in the same, you're still doing it from the center, you're still doing it from here. And all this talk about qi, because that's another problem. With internal arts, this is where you start hearing a lot of the gobbledygook about qi and internal power, and then all the BS starts coming in about being able to blast somebody from far away, which is nonsense. All that stuff really boils down to just body mechanics, really. And where you get that seemingly mysterious power from where it seems you barely did anything and they go flying is just learning how to use this, your core, more effectively, and training your body to move in a way that we normally don't move. You're training muscles that you normally don't train. And just like how your the muscles in your fingers get more effective in learning how to write in the beginning, it's hard to write. You're writing in big letters in order to do it more effectively, and your fingers are cramping up in the beginning. When you're a kid, it's rough. Nowadays, it's nothing for us. And we do all these fine motor skills and fine motor control with our fingers in order to write. And if you're really good at writing, your script looks really good. Your letters look really good, and you can write much smaller and more efficiently, and it's quick and more effective, and you barely feel any effort at all. Same thing with here. Your core muscles in the beginning, it's hard to do it, but later on, you have much more fine muscle control on how to do it from here. And all your power is coming from your stance and your legs and your core, and the rotation of your core makes it so that the motions that you do, it looks like you barely did anything, but they go flying. You're just training different muscles, your internal muscles, your core muscles. That's all it is. And Kung Fu, no matter what style of training in, whether it's Taijiquan or Baguazhang or Baji or um, cha style, no matter what style it is, you're going to be engaging that core. It all ends up the same way. There's really no difference. And that's why I say there really is an external or internal art. There really is no such thing, because they're both, all those styles are going to end up basically using similar methods to achieve their results. No matter what type of power is used, whether it's a smashing one, whipping one, whatever, the core is still being used. The same body mechanics are being done. In fact, the style Luchi Bafa kind of blows this out of the water, because all Luchi Bafa is just using the basic training techniques of all these so-called internal styles and saying, well, if we just use those basic mechanics, we'll always win. Luchi Bafa, by the way, if anyone wants to know what that style is, it basically just means 6 harmonies, 8 methods. And it's just basically using the so-called 6 harmonies of fighting, the 6 harmonies, getting your joints aligned. Those are the 6 harmonies. And the 8 different methods of power issuance and combat technique. Because they looked at the guy who made that, just looked at all the other styles, and what they basically are using the same basic mechanics. This is more or less, I'm generalizing here, but more or less they're just saying that, all these effective fighting styles are using the same mechanics. All I have to do is figure out what those mechanics are and just put them together, and boom, I'll always win. Which is kind of similar to MMA fighting. All these different fighting styles have basic mechanics and basic ways of fighting that work. You just take those basic strategies and you got an effective fighting art. Same thinking here. Only they were thinking about this years ago. An old guy I remember back in New York's Chinatown, when I used to get martial arts weapons and books and stuff back in Chinatown. There was an old guy there. He knew Luchi Bafa, but I had no idea what it was, because he gave me I asked him what he knew, and he gave me the English name for it. He said, "Oh, I know 6 harmonies, 8 methods. You learn that, you beat anyone." See, at the time, I didn't know what he was talking about. Now that I know what it is, I can't help but laugh, because that's the thing. Yeah, these methods, you'll beat anyone. What he's basically saying is, the basic mechanics of fighting. Yeah, you'll know how to fight. That's all it is. There's nothing mysterious about it, and there's nothing internal about it, really, when you think about it. So, yeah, I've hammered on this long enough, and I'm trying to... I didn't want this video to be too long. I'm going to be very upset if this video is over 20 minutes. I don't know how long it is yet. But I hope I've gone into more depth, and I hope it makes more sense why I say there's really no such thing as an internal art and an external one. One, the martial arts of old didn't really believe in that. They didn't even... That was a distinction they weren't even thinking about. They just had their fighting art. And second, these arts are really doing the same things anyway. It's just that the way they train, one trains technique first, power issuance second. The other one trains the power issuance first, and then drills the technique out of that second. But they both meet in the same place, and the results are more or less the same. So there really is no distinction, other than just their approach to training to make their fighting, their combat effectiveness more effective. That's really the only distinction. If you want to argue that because of that type of training that makes the styles different, maybe you might have a point, but I don't think it's much of a point, and I don't really think that it's that much of a distinction. I really do think that that particular distinction is meaningless. Maybe that makes a bit more sense, rather than me saying, oh, there's no such thing as an internal art and an external art. It might make a bit more sense if I say that internal-external distinction is meaningless. But when you consider that the so-called external art doesn't even fit the definition that's put upon it, i.e. that they depend primarily on muscular strength as far as limb strength goes to power their blows, when you realize that's not really true, then yeah, the distinction's meaningless. Or I could flip it around. Those who claim that internal art does not use muscle power at all, they're fooling themselves. Yeah, it does. It's just not the obvious muscles that they're using. They're using their core. That's what's powering their blows. So on one hand, we can say that the external arts are not just depending on muscular strength, i.e. limb strength, to power their blows. And you could flip it around and say that, oh, those guys, the internal arts, who thinking they're using some mysterious energy to send somebody flying. No, they're using physical strength to do it. It's just not the physical strength you think it is. And they're just doing it more efficiently. It's body mechanics. Anyway, that's enough. Hope that's not enough. Hope I made my point clear. Catch you guys later.